My name doesn't matter because this story is not about a name. It is about a woman who once believed that marriage was the crown of a woman's life, the door to happiness, and the answer to all her prayers. I grew up in a home where marriage was praised more than education, more than dreams, more than self-discovery. From a young age, I was taught that a girl's destiny was to be chosen, to be given, to be handed over like a gift. And so, I grew up waiting for the day my husband would come, waiting for the day my family would smile in pride as they handed me over, waiting for the life I was told would finally begin after I wore the veil and signed the papers. I was 24 when the proposal came. It wasn't really a proposal, not in the romantic way young girls fantasize about. There was no nervous young man with flowers, no trembling voice asking for my hand, no soft gaze promising love. Instead, it was a conversation in our living room. My parents sat across from me, their eyes shining with excitement. "He is a good man," my father said. "His family is respectable, his business is stable, and he has promised to take care of you. This is a good match." My mother nodded vigorously, already listing the advantages. He was from a decent family, he was older and more experienced, he could provide. I wanted to ask, what about love? But the words died in my throat. Love, in my culture, was considered a luxury. Respect, stability, and reputation, these were the currencies of a good marriage. And so I smiled weakly, too timid to protest, too afraid to disappoint the people who had raised me. My silence became my consent. The wedding happened quickly. One moment I was a daughter in my parents' house, the next I was a wife in a stranger's home. The music, the laughter, the blessings, all of it was loud, too loud, drowning out the quiet voice inside me that whispered, "Are you ready?" I told myself I would grow to love him. I told myself that affection would blossom with time, that respect would turn into passion. But deep down, I knew I was stepping into the unknown, and my heart was not prepared. The first few weeks were confusing. He was polite, almost distant, as though we were two actors placed in the same play but reading different scripts. He fulfilled his duties. He provided food, shelter, even gifts. But his eyes never softened when they looked at me. His voice never carried warmth. He was kind but not loving, respectful but not intimate. And I, desperate to make it work, forced myself to smile, to cook, to serve, to bend in every way I could, hoping that my sacrifice would open the door to his heart. But instead of opening, the door shut tighter. Months passed, and I began to see the cracks. He was impatient, dismissive, sometimes cruel in small ways. He mocked my dreams of continuing my education, telling me a wife's place was at home. He criticized my cooking, my clothing, even the way I laughed. In public, he smiled and spoke softly, but behind closed doors, he was cold and demanding. And slowly, piece by piece, my confidence began to crumble. I wanted to tell my parents, but every time I tried, their voices echoed in my head. "He is a good man. Be patient. Marriage is not easy. Learn to endure." So I endured. I swallowed my pain and wore a mask of happiness. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple. Inside, I was fading. The abuse started quietly. Not with fists but with words. Words that sliced deeper than any knife. "You're useless. You're nothing without me. No man would want you." Each insult chipped away at me until I believed them. Then came the isolation. He forbade me from seeing my friends. He monitored my phone calls. He kept me under a silent cage, and I obeyed, too frightened to resist. And then, one night it became physical. I had forgotten to iron his shirt. That small mistake unleashed a storm. His hand struck my face with a force I never imagined he possessed. I tasted blood, I felt the sting, but what hurt more was not the slap. It was the realization that I was trapped. I cried myself to sleep that night, and many nights after. Still I stayed. Why? Because I had been taught that a woman endures. Because I feared the shame of divorce. Because I believed that leaving meant failure, and failure was not an option. Because I hoped, oh how I hoped that he would change. But hope can be a dangerous drug. It keeps you chained to pain, whispering that tomorrow will be different, even when every yesterday looks the same. Years slipped by. Became a shadow of myself. The girl who once dreamed of traveling, of learning, of building a career was gone. In her place stood a woman with tired eyes, shaking hands, and a broken spirit. My breaking point came the night he threw me against the wall in front of his family. I remember the silence that followed, the way his relatives averted their eyes, pretending not to see. I remember the burning humiliation, the aching loneliness of realizing that no one would defend me. That was the night I decided. If I stayed, I would die. Maybe not physically, but my soul, my dreams, my very essence would wither away completely. So, with trembling courage, I left. It wasn't easy. My parents were disappointed. My community whispered behind my back. She failed. She couldn't keep her home. She is a disgrace. But for the first time in years, I felt alive. Felt free. I had nothing, no wealth, no husband, no reputation. But I had myself, and that was more than enough. The road to healing was long. I had to rebuild not just my life but my identity. I had to remind myself that I was worthy, that I was intelligent, that I was more than someone's wife. Therapy helped. Support groups helped. But what healed me most was the decision to love myself fiercely, unapologetically, in a way I had never done before. And slowly I grew. I went back to school, found work. I made friends who valued me for who I was. I laughed again, truly laughed. Not the polite laughter of survival but the deep, bubbling laughter of joy. I found that life after failure was not only possible, it was beautiful. But let me be honest. My story is one of survival, of redemption, of hope. Not every woman escapes like I did. Some stay until their souls are extinguished. Some stay until the abuse ends their lives. Some stay because society silences them, because fear chains them, because no one tells them they deserve more. And that is why I share this story. Not for pity, not for sympathy, but for the lessons it carries. If you are listening to me, hear this. Marriage is not the prize of a woman's life. Your worth is not measured by a man's approval. Love without respect is slavery. Commitment without kindness is bondage. And silence in the face of abuse is not patience. It is self-destruction. Do not be afraid to walk away from what kills you. Do not let the voices of society drown out the whisper of your soul. Do not believe that endurance is virtue when it costs you your life. Yes, marriage can be beautiful when it is built on love, respect, and partnership. But when it is built on control, fear, and violence, it is a prison. And no human being was created to live in a prison. I stand here today not as a victim but as a survivor. My scars remind me of where I've been, but they do not define where I'm going. I have learned that failure is not the end. Sometimes it is the beginning of freedom. And so, I end my story with hope. Hope that every woman trapped in silence will find her voice. Hope that every broken heart will learn to love itself again. Hope that someday society will stop glorifying endurance and start celebrating freedom. But I also end with caution. Not all stories like mine end with freedom. Some end in funerals. Some end in madness. Some end in permanent scars. That is why we must speak, why we must teach, why we must change. Because silence is the greatest ally of abuse. This is my truth. This is my journey. And if you take anything from my words, let it be this. You are enough. You are worthy. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to choose yourself.